Good morning. Welcome to Richard Harris. We'd like to thank him for being with us. And Richard, we'd like you to start by telling us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, where you are.
Thanks, Gideon. I hate talking about myself, but I will since you asked. My name is Richard Harris. I've been in sales and sales training for a long time. I can literally say last century. Lately, for the last 8 or 9 years, I've been doing sales training with companies like Google and Pandora and Visa and PagerDuty. Really, I live in the Bay Area, so I'm nicely connected into the tech scene here. And basically, for what I do, I teach reps how to earn the right to ask questions, which questions to ask, and when to do it. That's sort of the essence of the pain I solve versus what I do. So I've got a wife, I have 2 great kids, I have a dog named Lola, we live outside San Francisco. So that's me in a nutshell, but I'm happy to explore more if you're interested.
Fantastic, Richard. That sets the stall out well. And I think where we'll start with is trying to understand where we are now as sales organizations, and perhaps understanding the current context of the sales climate and an ecosystem. So Richard, my first question for you is, where are we now as sales organizations, as sales leaders in the context of the current virus situation?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. It's interesting because we still have to focus on process, goals, training, coaching. But I think we have to even take one small step back and look at it organizationally. Like, if it's changing for sales, it's got to be changing for everybody else, right? So what's marketing doing in the execution to support sales, right? How is sales getting feedback back to marketing so that they can execute well? Same with product development, right? Customer feedback, prospect feedback. How are we getting that over to product development? Even if you don't have that feedback, what does the product roadmap even look like for the next 3 to 6 months, given this new world we're all looking in, right? Organizationally, how is the organization going to function in a work from home environment? So yeah, I think it's super important for us to focus on it in sales. I think it's still goes back to the basics, right? Of, good messaging, knowing your ICP, understanding your ICP's current state of mind versus maybe what it was like 6 months ago, and maybe what it's going to be like in 3 months from now when hopefully some of this stuff lifts. It's not like the spigots can just be turned on. So I think you have to adjust for those pieces now.
Richard, I'm going to ask you a fundamental question, just leveraging your experience here. For a sales practitioner at listening to this, would they need to shift their mindset from sell now to let's build trust and relationship now to cash in on that, or to benefit from that after the virus has eased? Is there a shift in those sales parameters, or is it still business as usual? We'll go through the same steps as before. I will gauge the relationship, try to understand their buying cycle, and I will still try to hit a portion of quota. What is that adjustment like? Because I don't think there's a playbook for this.
Well, it's interesting because people say that there isn't, and to a certain extent there is.
Okay.
The playbook is listen to your prospect and customer.
Okay.
The playbook is ask better questions. The playbook is ask relevant questions. So for me, and this is not I did not create this, but I like where it went and I sort of iterated on it. But I like the idea of asking someone, which bucket are you in? Are you in hey, we're heads down, we just want to stay afloat right now, which is totally fine, and we understand, we're not going to bother you. We're talking to other people who say that, we're heads down, but we're starting to examine, we're starting to look and do research so that as things adjust, we can start to make some decisions about next steps and purchases and growth. And then I have a third group of people I'm talking to who are just full steam ahead. Like, there's no issue, right? There are some companies that, are fortunate in that regard.
Right.
Which bucket are you in? So I know how to tailor my messaging to you, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect or customer. And so again, that's no different than what you were asking before. It's just what you're asking and how you're asking it has true empathy behind it. And you're going to respect whatever their answer is. If their answer is number one, then you say, great, Gideon, great. Thank you for letting me know. is it appropriate for me to contact you again in 30 days to see if anything's changed?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're doing all the things you should have been doing all along. Your messaging is just better. That's all.
Mm.
What do I think is going to come out of all this? I think more direct conversations, more empathetic conversations, and people are going to learn how to ask for the right thing instead of throwing shit against the wall. So,
Do you think permissions have changed between buyer and seller in this situation?
what do you mean by permissions?
So, for example, in the past working in B2B sales, it might be sometimes that you'll ask a question as a salesperson, but the buyer might not want to disclose their hand, so to speak, because they were, trying to weigh up all the options. They were probably trying to hold out for a better deal and not give that salesperson a full sense of confidence how to lead the conversation. I imagine that there's a certain leveler here where there might be more permission from the buyer to be more transparent, more direct, and also empathetic to
Yeah.
salespeople right now. Like, that salespeople are going through a tough time, and you're not
Now,
trying to deliberately, make them miss paying rent or whatever.
so here's my answer to that, because this is what I teach, is that you always have to earn the right to ask questions,
Okay.
regardless of what the situation around the world is, right? It may be more hyper focused on this. Personally, I think some salespeople who've been doing it the same way they've always done it are annoying people. I think people are more annoyed than they are anything, because they're not asking that question like I asked up front, which is, which kind of person are you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're not earning this is my phrase. I teach people how to earn the right to ask questions, which questions to ask and when.
Okay.
They don't know how to do it. And if they don't know how to do it, and they haven't known how to do it for a long time, right? Unfortunately, it's not all salespeople. There are many salespeople who figured this out, taken tons of different trainings out there,
Mm-hmm.
taken my training. But that's the key. The key is, how do you earn the right to ask the question, regardless of a global pandemic?
Right. That's very interesting. So that's a really good insight into perhaps where we are now. Where do you feel that this is going in terms of next steps? What do you feel the evolution through this process looks like? And what do you think will uniquely stay, and what do you think will uniquely change?
Um, I think people, I think they're kind of some of them are one and the same. So feedback loops have always been critical,
Mm-hmm.
but I think people are going to get better at feedback loops. I think people are going to stop wasting time in ungodly meetings,
Okay.
right? Um, I've talked to people where they're like, wow, I can actually get a hold of people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, what were they doing with their time before? And that's not on the sales rep to figure out. That's on the CEO or whatever. Like, what silly meetings were you having
Mm-hmm.
that you now realize are not necessarily worthy of your time,
Mm-hmm.
right? My hope is that sticks.
Right.
My concern will be that people are going to be so happy to be back in front of people that they're going to take more meetings, right? Like, that's going to be my concern, right? And we're going to get back to the old habits.
And you know why? I would say, coming from a psychology background, because people will actually be afraid that if they act alone or remotely or whatever it may be, that they might not be making the right decisions. I think there'll be a need almost to empathize with each other in those meetings of, I know what you've been going through, and to double, triple check that they're on the right path. Even though the people might be super experienced, there's a human part of you that will want to do that, even though it doesn't fully make sense.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So I think that's one of the things. I think, training and coaching, people are definitely going to understand the difference better now. I think
Okay.
people have been learning that difference, and I think we'll double down on that.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to understand how important and valuable training and coaching are, right?
Yeah, agreed.
So I think that'll actually stick. I think the sales stack will continue to be as important. I
Mm-hmm.
think what's in the sales, all these sort of things that used to be nice to haves are must haves now, right? Quality data has always been. That's going to be the hardest one, I think, to adjust, right? With all the layoffs, I'm curious to see how Discover.org and everybody how quickly they can address their data challenge, right? On the one hand, it's really good for their business, right?
Right.
Because all these people changing jobs means you got to go get the data. The question will come back to all of them that their data analysis will be less than what it was 6 months ago because fewer people will have changed jobs. Like it's just a numbers game there.
You
But
know,
they'll kick back up. That doesn't mean though that Discover Org, those companies and Zoom Info, sorry, that's their new name, that they should go through a downturn. I think the reality of the human experience needs to expect that, right? And be reasonable with the expectation.
that one
So
actually, because I come from the
that is
marketing
my
position, there's a relatively easy fix for that one. You basically target the accounts and you know the target personas in the accounts, and the fact that it's a different person is totally fine because you're targeting, it's account-based marketing and it's persona-based role. The fact that it's a new employee is totally legit. But as long as you know you're going after the right accounts, it's literally can be the exact same way of kind of marketing execution as before if you're set up to do that. And if you're not, then here's a good here's a good first step.
Yep.
So that being said, I found it really interesting when you talked about training coming out of this. I wonder how many sales reps were trained to go through this. I wonder what gaps there were when you removed face-to-face sales.
Go through what? When you say this?
This being
What's
the
this?
virus and remote selling, it's different, for example, than field sales who might leverage selling and leveraging personal relationships in person, building up chemistry, camaraderie, and all of that.
So nothing there has changed, in my opinion. Nothing there has changed. The only thing that's changed is the buyer's willingness to purchase bigger deals, right? You got to remember, I'm from the old school of, I was in San Francisco in the late 90s and early 2000s when people were talking about, online Christmas shopping was going to hit almost $1 billion. Like almost, right? And now brick and mortar's dead for the most part, right? Which this is even going to put another nail in that coffin. So all that's changed is the buyer's experience more than the seller's experience. All these field reps, I've talked to several people, they're like, we need to train our field reps on how to be inside reps. I'm like, yeah, then that means they need to be better at the CRM because the conversation's still the same, right? If the field rep is using dinner and golf and all those crutches to build the relationship, that's silly, right? Now, their buyer might feel like, well, I'm not going to do this until they do this for me. Okay, well then Richard's not that person. Like I'm not that sales rep, right? Happy to go play golf, but respectfully, let's make sure it's worth my time. I'm not going to go spend 4 hours on a golf course to get a maybe. Sorry, it just doesn't work that way for me.
Right.
Some industries will continue to be that way, but not as many, right? People were not comfortable making hundreds of thousands of dollar decisions virtually or on the phone 8, 9, maybe 12 or 13 years ago. It's nothing for a CEO to make $100,000 decision in a phone call or a Zoom call. And the fact that field reps don't get that yet, or field reps haven't done it, just tells me that those are the people who I'm concerned about, because people are going to realize that these expensive field reps are not necessary. And the relationship sale is there, and you still have to have a relationship, but not to that extent. So I think those are the people I'm most concerned about.
Right. And you touched on the word that you said was buyer experience being the currency of that sales process. Is there any good advice or direction that you would leverage in how to create a good buyer experience digitally using the means that are available to you? Or the flip side of that, what pitfalls to avoid?
Well, I think you have to, for me, all sales conversations come down to earning the right to ask the question and then asking the tough question and asking for the next step. That's kind of it, right? If I don't get off the call and don't say, hey, Gideon, when should I talk? Can I contact you next week if I don't hear back from you? which is the best way to close any conversation, then I've done my job poorly. That existed in the field world and in the inside world. So I haven't figured that piece out, and I'll be willing to admit that maybe I'm just too jaded, but that's, I guess for me, it's so second nature that maybe I'm overlooking certain things, right? And that's okay. Like I'm happy for you or anyone else to call me out and say, well, Richard, you're not seeing this part of it, because you're right. Maybe I have a blind spot,
I think what stood out to me when I spoke to you previously was the fact that you said, in terms of buyer experience, that there's now an internal need for sales organizations to request the new product marketing collateral and resources from other line of business areas of business to support the current needs, perhaps the slightly different dynamics, and make sure that as a business everything is internally aligned. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about what you were thinking there and what your experience said?
So the biggest thing I think sales reps need in their help is they need case studies, right? And use cases,
Okay.
which is product marketing and marketing's job, right? So if you've been able to close some business in the last 60 days through this new world, you should case study that so that you can help other customers understand it's okay. And if you can't talk about it publicly, you should use case it internally so the reps know that it's possible, so that you can empower them and stop letting them come up with excuses.
Yeah.
Right. That to me is the most important thing. Yes, I think there are obviously nuances at every company, right? What y'all do is very different than what I do, which is different than, any other sales platform, engagement platform, or marketing platform, or whatever. So there's always a nuance to that. But the goal of marketing and product marketing is to provide the air cover for right now, as well as plan for the future. And oftentimes I think there's through nobody's fault. It's not anybody's fault, is that sometimes that's where the internal conflict between sales and marketing can be. Sales needs it right now. I got a customer right now. Marketing's thinking, well, we've got this for right now. That should be good enough. We need to think about what's going to happen in the future. And that, to me, is where the CEO balance comes in. That's where the CRO has to come in and sort of say, here's how we need to dedicate our time to this stuff, right? We need these 4 things. Help sales and marketing create the alignment of the top priorities for both departments and where they're needed, in both short and long term. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it was a great answer. And actually, the common theme that I feel from everything that you shared today already is that you're making something that's potentially scary, or something that we can easily be anxious about, really simple. Like, everything that you say just feels like that makes sense, that's obvious. Confirmation, like, you're saying the right things, and those things are within my power to act upon. It's nothing that you've shared yet today which is kind of left field, out of my control. Everything is actionable and achievable from what you shared today, which is a nice confirmation, right? You're halfway around the world confirming that things are not so different, even all the way over there on the West Coast, which is definitely very positive. Good confirmation. Is there anything that I should have asked today that you wanted me to ask that I didn't cover? What is the question?
I think the one thing we got to adjust, and this only comes through everybody's individual human experience, is being able to just sort of look at it at an emotional level of like, okay, if you think about it, yes, the world has totally changed. In other ways, it kind of hasn't. We just need to adjust to what's happening, right? Which is, that's no different than when you decide to make a commitment in a relationship that you're not going to see other people, or you decide to get married, or you decide to have children. Like, granted, those decisions you get to make maybe at your own pace. This one's a little aggressive. It was a little, we weren't quite ready for this decision. So I think taking that ability to adjust your mindset and exhale and kind of say, you know what, my mindset needs to be, I got this, right? I got this on the personal side. I need to do the right things to keep myself, my family healthy. I need to do the same to keep my business healthy. And in some cases, the business stuff hasn't really changed that much. It's just maybe the execution side. And so we have to just sort of get our arms around it. That's, I think maybe just talking about the mindset was maybe the one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want people to sort of maybe walk away understanding that, you know, yes, it's okay to feel a little bit of everything,
Mm-hmm.
feel nervous, feel scared, feel happy. If, you know, look, I told someone the other day, they, you know, they just, you know, they don't know how to feel. I said, you should feel everything. I said, you can feel bad for someone who lost their job, but you can also feel happy you haven't.
Right.
You're allowed to be okay with it. You don't need to run around and scream like, I got my job, I still got my job. You know, maybe to your significant other of like, oh my God, thank God, you know, like that's, you know, but you can still feel happy about that. You can feel joy, even in all this chaos, right? You're allowed to feel everything is sort of my point. And that's really what I want people to understand. Because I think once you acknowledge that, it becomes easier to move forward.
I agree. There's a good school of thinking on that, which is basically like grief counseling. You kind of go through the motions. You know, you need to go through kind of anger. Why is this happening now? To kind of the grief of why has this happened to me? All the way to be able to then get to that next point that you alluded to there, which is, oh, it has happened to me. Which parts of this are within my control to affect? What can I do differently while not being completely okay with it all? To I'm now a work in progress. That
I
is
love what you just said. I love that. What can I do differently even though I'm not okay with it all? Right? Like that's life, right? You
right.
know, hopefully there are times where you're more okay with most things. Right?
Right.
But that was really, I like that. Sorry
And
to
then what
interrupt.
and then what you do is you beat out a pathway for yourself to say, I've been through this before. It was painful last time, but I overcame it. And then your brain remembers that in the future to say, well, I overcame despite it not being easy or perfect or being fully equipped for it. But I know that I'm capable to deal with this and to get through this because I've proven that to myself before now.
Yep.
And
Love it.
definitely that helps focus us. I think a lot of people probably burn a lot of mental energy on worrying about the bits that they're not sure about.
Yep. Totally
Richard,
agree. Totally.
Richard, your insights have been truly valuable, truly actionable, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share that with us. We are all going to go away and think about that process this, and then think about what we can proactively do now to shape our current circumstances.
Awesome, man. It's fun. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Gideon. So thank you.